This move immediately stakes a claim in the center, opens diagonals for the queen and bishop, and prepares to develop pieces efficiently, adhering to sound opening principles. This move, e5, directly challenges white's central pawn and opens lines for black's bishop and queen, establishing symmetry and inviting a principled fight for control of the center. This move develops a knight towards the center and attacks black's central pawn, preparing to control key squares and potentially castle. This move develops a knight to a central square, controlling key squares and preparing for pawn advances while directly contesting white's control of d4. This move initiates the Ruy-Lopez, a foundational opening where white develops a bishop to attack black's knight, indirectly pressuring the e5 pawn and creating immediate positional tension. This move, a6, challenges the bishop and forces white to decide whether to retreat, trade, or maintain tension in this specific variation of the Ruy-Lopez opening. This move, ba4, is the standard continuation in the Ruy-Lopez, maintaining pressure on the knight and preparing to develop the queenside pieces. This move, developing the knight to a natural square, challenges white's central pawn and prepares to castle, a fundamental principle in opening play. Castling kingside secures the monarch and prepares to connect the rooks, a fundamental strategic principle in the opening. This move initiates the open variation of the Ruy-Lopez, leading to sharper play by immediately challenging white's central pawn structure. This move forcefully challenges black's central pawn, aiming to open lines for white's pieces and seize the initiative in the Ruy-Lopez. Morphy defense. This move initiates the Ruy-Lopez Morphy defense, where black immediately challenges white's bishop and gains queenside space. This move retreats the bishop to a safe square, maintaining pressure along the a2-8 diagonal and preparing to defend the e4 pawn if necessary. This move solidifies the center and opens the diagonal for black's queen, challenging white's central pawn control. This captures the central pawn, opening lines and initiating a strategic trade to gain a tempo and control of the d-file. This move develops a piece while preparing to recapture the pawn on e5 and contest the important d5 square. This move prepares to reinforce the d4 pawn and develop the queen's knight, aiming to solidify the center and prepare for further pawn advances or piece activity. This move, 9, bc5, immediately develops the bishop to an active square, aiming to pressure white's central pawns and potentially prepare for kingside castling, while also challenging the control of the d4 square. This move develops the knight to a centralizing square, preparing to support a pawn advance with e5 or to redeploy to f3 or g4, while also reinforcing the queen's protection of the e4 pawn. Castling kingside secures the king and prepares to connect the rooks, a standard and prudent development move in this variation of the Ruy-Lopez. This repositioning of the bishop to c2 enhances its control over the critical d3 square and prepares for potential pawn advances on the kingside. This move develops the bishop to an active square, eyeing the weak f2 pawn and potentially preparing to challenge white's control of the d4 square. This move is a typical maneuvering sequence in the Ruy-Lopez, specifically the Morphy defense, aiming to reroute the knight to a more active square, potentially g5 or d4, to challenge black's well-placed bishop on c5. This move develops the bishop to a more active square on the long diagonal, preparing to contest white's control of key central squares and potentially exchange off white's strong knight on b3. This move 13, h3 is a prophylactic maneuver to challenge black's active bishop on g4, preventing it from pinning the knight on f3 and potentially disrupting white's kingside pawn structure. Black reinforces the pawn on e5 with the bishop, maintaining central tension and preparing to recapture on d4 if white exchanges pieces. This aggressive pawn push on g4 aims to disrupt black's bishop development and gain space on the king side, but it weakens white's king's pawn structure and could lead to a dangerous initiative for black if the pawn becomes a target. This move reinforces the defense of the g6 pawn and prepares to retreat the bishop to a more active diagonal should white's h-pawn advance further. This exchange resolves the central tension and simplifies the position.